Hi, everybody. Welcome to yoga today. Thanks for joining me. Today, we are going to be doing happy hips. So this is something I love to do a variety of this class quite often throughout the year because working on my hips is one of my favorite things to do. And when you're working on the hips, you just take it at your own pace, okay? You're going to modify as you need because I find that everybody has such a huge difference in range of motion and what's comfortable in our own bodies, right? So you just take breaks when you need. What we're going to do is explore all the different range of motion that our hips are capable of. And in our daily life, we probably have lost a lot of that range of motion because we're very linear. So we sit in chairs or we ride bikes or we walk, but we don't tend to use our hips to the full degree that they can go. So I call it the 6 degrees of happiness. There's 6 kind of ways that we can move our hips. Flexion, which we're doing right now if you're seated, right? So where you're folding at that hip crease, that would be flexing your hips. Extension would be opening up the hip crease. So something like a lunge where you're opening that hip crease. And then we're going to play with opening and closing the legs, right? So this is abduction, adduction, closing the legs. And then the inward and outward rotation comes into play as well. So we're going to hit all those different ways. And then often in yoga, we're combining those. So, you know, maybe like in a tree pose, we're working with some flexion, but also external rotation. So that's called circumduction. All right. So you ready? Let's get started. We're going to start, of course, on our backs. My favorite way to start. Sometimes I start us seated or in some other funky position. This is my favorite way. And you're just going to see if it's comfortable to have your legs long, you could take your legs long. And if you're going to do that, I'm going to suggest that you open your heels to the corner edges of your mat. So give your hips some space to start. And just let your feet roll open to wherever is comfortable. And if that feels really yucky for your lower back first thing in the morning or midday, depending on, or evening if you're doing the recording, then you can always modify, right? You can bend your knees, soles of the feet on the earth. And just start to center in. So you might start with your eyes open, kind of orienting to the space, looking around you. Noticing where you are. And then start to close your eyes and look at that inner landscape. When you close your eyes, is it completely dark or do you see little spots of color? Do you see shape? Do images start to come up? And start to drop awareness into the body through the breath. So focusing on whatever it is your natural breath is doing this morning. Okay, so it's flowing in and out for sure. But does it feel deep? Does it feel shallow? You can ignore the firecrackers blowing up in the background. Okay, so start to get this sense of how it is that you're breathing this morning. So we can breathe all day long without putting any awareness on it. Thank goodness. But we can also focus on the breath, helping to anchor our mind to this moment. And just start to notice how you feel when you focus on your breath, even just for a couple minutes. Does it kind of invite this sensation of peace and relaxation? Right, just giving our mind somewhere to focus. Feeling the breath in different parts of your body. I'm sure you can feel your belly rising and falling, your rib cage moving with the breath. Maybe you feel the breath all the way up to your shoulders and all the way down to your feet. And if your legs are long, I want you to start to imagine, how your hips are. So with your legs long, and if your knees are bent and it's not comfortable to have legs long, that's okay. So imagine that your spine is your center axis, the center line. And you've got your legs coming off of your pelvis. And are they open to the same degree? Right? You don't have to change how you're lying, just notice. Does one leg feel a little closer to midline? Right, getting the sense of our body, embodiment. Does one hip feel more open than the other? So a good way to judge that would be the angle of your toes, the angle of your feet. Right? If one hip is more open, those toes are probably rolling out a little bit more. Maybe they're a little closer to the earth. I always say that when we work with the hips, I call this the fountain of youth class, because I find that if we keep our hips supple and open and moving in the different ranges that they're capable of, it really helps us to stay youthful, right? And you see those people that have that agility, right? That ability to move quickly, lightly on their feet. Now, if that's not where we're starting with, that's okay. We're going to practice and we're going to get better at that, right? And so just inviting in that sense of playfulness, youthful energy as we explore the postures today. Let's connect to the in-breath and take a full body stretch. Taking the time to stretch out your body, moving intuitively. Maybe you're rolling your wrists and ankles. Maybe you're making a funny face. Maybe you're stretching a little longer through one side and then the other. And then when you have your next exhale, take your knees to your chest. Maybe one comes up first and then the other. And stretch out your lower back. And again, move intuitively, right? Maybe you feel this urge from your body to rock a little side to side, or maybe it wants to be still. And we're going to start to play with the hips, warming up the hips. So taking the hands onto your kneecaps, right? Left on left, right on right. And we're going to take our knees together and close to the body. And then you're going to take them away from you until your arms straighten. And then widen your knees and circle them back around towards your body. So you're doing big circles. You're just going to keep going with that motion. So big circles with the knees, but really we're moving the legs and the hip socket. And I want us to have the intention that your legs are doing the work. Okay, so just for a second think, okay, my legs are making this movement happen on my hips. My hands are just floating along for the ride. They're floating on top of the knees. You might notice your pelvis helping, right? Maybe you feel this sense of your pelvis kind of rocking, right? Where the weight shifts to the tailbone when your knees are away from you. And as your knees circle back towards your body, maybe you feel the weight shift up to your waistband. And that's okay, just go with that. And then go the opposite way. So explore. And again, remember, legs are doing the work. So you're feeling all these little muscles around your hips, your inner thighs, your core. Right? Legs doing the work, arms floating along for the ride. Maybe you've synchronized movement and breath already, or maybe we're not even focusing on breath. Bring the magic of the breath to the foreground. Maybe that slows the movement down. Okay, and then let that go for a second. Just do whatever feels right. Maybe you're hugging your knees to your chest, rocking. Maybe you take your feet down to the earth for a rest. Windshield wiper. It's going to be different for everybody. Let's come into that one again. So your knees hugged towards your body, hands on kneecaps. And we're going to do the same. You're going to take your knees together and away, and then open them wide and circle them back around. But this time I want you to imagine that your arms are doing the work. Okay, so see if you can just find some kind of freeness in your hips, right? The muscles can relax and your arms are taking the brunt of the energy here to do this. Okay, so just, all we did is change the intention. And notice how it feels different. And try going opposite way. I'm sure there'll be some core helping you as well. And I'm sure that pelvis is still kind of rocking, right? You still feel that weight transferring different as knees go away from you and knees come towards you. And then let that go. Let your mind have a break. Take a little break, just reconnecting to your breath. It's like a reset, right? Moving in any way that feels good to let that go. We're going to try it one more time. So hugging knees to the chest. But this time we're going to put a boundary on our pelvis. So I want you to just think about drawing your lower abdomen in and up, right? So that the pelvis is not going to be able to rock and help. We want neutral pelvis, hands on the knees, and without the pelvis rocking. So you should feel the weight even on the back of the pelvis. It's not shifting to the tailbone or up to the waistline. So the chances are your movement has to be much smaller. And you're just circling around. And if it has to be really, really tiny, I don't care, that's okay. We're just isolating movement into the hip socket. We're using different little muscles now around the leg bones and in the hips. And notice, and then go the opposite way. And again, try to keep that little boundary on your pelvis, right? Keep your pelvis nice and neutral and still, just moving your legs. It's okay if it has to be really tiny. Maybe you've connected movement to breath. And notice, your muscles might get more tired more quickly. We're using little tiny muscles that we might not usually use because we've just let the pelvis help us. Maybe the mind gets tired of focusing so much on not letting the pelvis move. Good, and then let it go. So again, maybe, just finding what feels good to let that go and let your mind have a little break. I'm going to do some windshield wiper. You might just be hugging knees, right? A little bit of containment, a little hug. And let's prepare to come up to seated. So you could use momentum and roll forward or roll to the side, help yourself up. Coming up through seated. And taking your legs out in front of you. I'm going to move my water glass off to the side. And with your legs out in front of you, of course, you could always sit up on a cushion. Elevating your pelvis or your hips up a little bit might help, or you could add just a slight bend to the backs of your knees as well. You could also use fingertips for support. Okay, I don't want you rounding onto your tailbone. I do want you up on your sit bones, neutral pelvis. And then we're just going to play with inward-outward rotation of our legs. So we're just kind of rolling. You might need to give yourself some space, right? Just rolling them in and out. And again, I'm trying to just kind of focus this movement of leg bones. I'm imagining that I'm moving my bones. Okay, so it's not necessarily that I'm just flopping my feet, but I'm really thinking about I'm moving my leg bones in my hip socket. And then get different angles. Open your feet a little wider. And range of motion for inward or outward rotation might change, right? As we open our legs a little wider, maybe it gets a little more limited, and that's okay. We're just playing. We're getting curious. And we'll see, everybody's going to have a different range of motion that they can do this abduction, opening the leg. It's for some of us, this might be our max. You're just playing, you're going in and out, rotating. Imagine that you're like deep cleaning your hip sockets. Right, and just start to bring them a little closer. And then bend your knees, lean back onto your hands, but not on your tailbone. Still be up on your sits bones. And windshield wiper your legs side to side. Okay, so I'm just letting it go loosey-goosey. I'm letting my pelvis move. I'm letting my legs move, maybe even my spine a little bit. And then let's refine the movement a little bit. So your feet are as wide as your mat, and I'm going to get you to come up on your heels. So you've got some brightness in your feet, and you're going to take your knees to the right, but try to keep your sit bone connected. Okay, so it's a smaller movement now. Knees to the left. So keeping those sits bones glued, we're not letting the pelvis come up. Good. And just notice how your ego responds to that, right? Sometimes when it's like, oh, but it feels so much better to just kind of go freely. The ego likes big movement, I think. Personality, I also like to call my ego personality because I don't think it's a bad thing. And then when your knees are to the right, see if you can lift your left knee first and just go as wide as you can until you need to start bringing your right knee over. Okay, so again, we're just starting with then right knee up. There'll be a point where it catches, and then you need to start to bring the other one over. We're still keeping our sits bones glued. So just a little bit more of this really focused movement, conscious movement. And then we're going to satisfy the personality and just move in any way that we want to move. Okay, so make it bigger, get your upper body involved. And then start to contain a little bit of that energy, start to come back through center. And move on to all fours, hands and knees. Okay, setting ourselves up for success. Do you need extra cushion under your knees? Do you need to take care of your wrists, right? Is that deep flexion for the wrists not okay? You've got fists as options. You've got forearms as options. You could also place, this is a great little trick for wrists. Roll up the top edge of your mat and place the heel of the hand, right, on that roll. That's another great little trick. And preparing for a cat-cow, once you've got your foundation and you're moving with your breath, on the inhale, you're lifting your tailbone and you're opening your belly, your heart will open. And then you're tucking your tailbone. So your pelvis is tucking under as you exhale. And so initiating movement from the tailbone to the crown of the head. And you're moving at your own rhythm, matching your breath. And really try to articulate every little segment of your spine. Okay, try to feel this sequential flow. So for this one, the leg bones are staying stationary, and we're moving the pelvis over the tops of the leg bones to get that movement in our hip socket, right? This is playing with flexion, right, where we've got that, we're increasing the hip crease, if that makes sense. Good. Finish up your next breath, whether it be inhale or exhale, and come to neutral spine. So you've got that beautiful natural little curves of your spine. You're not letting your lower back sag. You're also not tucking your pelvis under. And the weight is even over both hands. We're going to slide right toes back. Keep the weight into your right hand. Okay, so resist that urge to shift to the left to make this easier. Use your core, and your toes are tucking into the earth, and you can shift back. Find your calf stretch. Maybe finding a little pulse. Feel the strength in your arms. Your head's a beautiful extension of your spine. Don't let your head droop. And then watching this funky little transition, this knee that's on the earth, we're going to pivot that knee. The foot comes behind us, and we're going to flip into a side plank. Okay, so I'm not facing you guys. I'll do the opposite side. So pivot on your bottom knee, and then open up into your side plank. Good, and then really start to think about opening up the front of the hip flexors. So if you're sticking your bum back behind you, you're not going to be feeling a lot of work, a lot of stretch. I want you to think about pressing your hip points forward, lifting up through your underside, right? Imagine there was a little fire underneath your bottom waist. You're lifting. Good, so we could make this more challenging. I'm not even going to go there because I feel that I'm working through my core. But you know, you could always extend demo, right? Both legs, feet staggered, or maybe stacked. It's like way too intense. I'm good here. Whew. And then take your gaze down, back out of it. And take your child's pose or down dog. Come onto your belly, do some windshield wiper. Okay, so you're just letting yourself have a rest here. So even if you're in down dog, it becomes an active rest. Good, and let's meet in tabletop, wherever you are. Just set your foundation up, right? Take care of your wrists, take care of your knees, find your neutral spine. Weight even over both hands. You're going to keep that weight pouring into your left hand as you slide your left toes back. We're coming into the other side. So resist that urge to shift over to the right. Draw that belly button in and up, Uddiyana Bandha. You can find your little gentle pulse, right? Your calf stretch, waking up the feet. Head, a beautiful extension of your spine. Okay, we're gonna switch into our side plank. So your bottom knee, that becomes your little support, right? We're pivoting on that bottom knee, and then we're flipping into our side plank. Good, radiate from your heart. Think of the different lines of energy in this pose. Into each arm, to the crown of the head, to your tailbone, right? We're not sticking our bum behind us. Press those hip points forward. Lift up through your underside. Woo. You know, you can always do different things to make it more challenging. You could go into the full side plank. You could also play with lifting one leg. Got lots of options here. Keep breathing. Good, let's turn our gaze. We're gonna prepare to come out of it nice and slow and mindful. And then sinking into whatever your reset pose is, right? Your rest posture. It might be a child's pose. If that was really intense for your wrists, you could take your palms together in a child's pose, forehead resting on a block or the earth. And as you take your hands up, you bend your elbows, your hands will be above your head, and you start to roll your wrists. Your fingers can be interlaced. Right, just getting some movement and circulation into your wrists. Make sure you roll the opposite way as well. And coming through all fours, let's take a lunge, right foot forward, walking that foot forward, stacking knee over ankle. And we're going to try to open up this left hip crease. So if you're feeling enough of a stretch where you are, then congratulations, you're in your pose. And if you're not, try tucking your back toes under, lift that left knee, and see if you can set it down maybe just an inch back. And so that should have just opened up the hips a little bit more. Good, you can keep those toes tucking under, or maybe the toes are flat. I find to stabilize my kneecap, it's better for me to tuck the toes. Good, and then think about lifting through the spine. So we don't want to be collapsing our weight to the earth. Great stretch for our psoas muscle, hip flexor. One of the only muscles that connects our legs through our pelvis to our spine, right? Lower body to upper body. Good, let's take it to the other side. So you could shift back into, if you want to pause in a child's pose or a down dog. And then start to get ready to set yourself up for lunge on the other side. So walking or helping that left foot forward, stacking your bones. And remember that little trick of maybe just challenging yourself a little bit, curling back toes under, lifting your knee up, and setting it back a centimeter, an inch back, or even a millimeter maybe. Just opening it up. Always feel free, if you feel really collapsed and it's just too hard to be down here, right? Blocks are a great option, or a chair if you had a chair or couch nearby. Give yourself that space. And you're sinking into your hips. You're lifting up and lengthening through the spine. We're just holding this lunge, right? An isometric stretch, a hold. Sometimes that's more challenging than moving. Good. And let's prepare to come to standing. So you're going to curl those back toes if they're not already there, and you're going to push off those toes. It might take a couple steps to come towards a forward fold, right? The transitions aren't always beautiful, but we get there. And let yourself hang in that forward fold, or feet are hip distance apart. Your weight is in your heels. You're bending your knees, getting a nice lengthening through your hamstrings. Let your head rock. And preparing to come up, root down through your feet, and you can rise up. So you could roll up, rounded spine, or if you have any sort of disc issues in your back, I would suggest coming up flat back, okay? Really using your core and powering up with the legs and the core. Beautiful. Now you're going to come to face the long edge of your mat. And we're opening our feet wide for a goddess pose. Of course, we had to throw goddess in here and hip clasp to build some strength around our booty and our legs and our hips. So your feet open wide, wider than shoulder distance apart. And then we start to move with that outward rotation, right? Leg bones moving in the hip socket. So your toes start to point out. And you're going to bend into that deep squat. Make sure your knees feel okay. Anytime we're working with the hips, zero tolerance for knee pain. Your knees should be in line with your toes. And of course, we all have a different range of motion. So some of us might be more narrow with our knees, toes more forward. Others might be able to open it wider. And wherever you are, try not to arch your back. So we're not exaggerating lower back curve and puffing the chest up. Okay? Contain some of that rib cage. You could always laugh. It's a good one to laugh in, like, oh my God, this is so much fun. Legs on fire. You can add your arms, shoulders relaxed. Yeah, good job, everybody. And if this wasn't enough, you could try sinking lower. Feel that burn. Take a break whenever you need it. If it's too much, you just come up. You can join us again. Try lifting one heel. Challenge yourself. It may or may not happen. Try the other heel. Keep breathing. Ujjayi breath really helps. Try lifting both heels. Is that possible? Maybe not in this lifetime. Ooh, and then root down through those heels, and oh, it's gonna feel so good. Come up. And now rotate your legs inward. So the upper leg bone in, your toes are gonna be in, your heels out. We're preparing for a wide angled forward fold. So soften up through your knees, a little buoyancy in your knees. And then press, I'm out of breath, by the way, just so if you are too, you don't feel so bad. This is a hard class. Hands on your hips and start to fold forward. We're gonna bring that heart rate down a little bit. Good, so forward fold, hands can be on your thighs. Fingertips can come to a block. Fingertips to the earth. Start to shift your weight back. Right, keep a little bend in the back of your knee. So try not to really lock your kneecap into place. We want to have a micro bend in the back of the knee. And take a few breaths. You might be able to ride the wave of the breath, and you might be able to sink a little deeper on your exhale. And wherever you are, bring some awareness to your shoulders. Notice if they're drooping, sagging with gravity. Okay, so I want you to imagine rolling your shoulders away from your ears, so they would need to fight gravity in this pose. Lots of space for the neck. Okay, let's prepare to come up. So come up to a flat back. Take your hands to your hips. You're going to have to engage that core, engage your legs, and then power up using the energy of the legs, the support of the feet. We were down there a while. If you get dizzy on the way up, exhale through an O mouth. And heel toe your feet together. And just bask in that glow for a second. Right? Close your eyes, Tadasana. Feel the strength of your legs. Maybe you get this sense of circulation or openness in your hips. We'll do tree pose, which is a great one for opening each side of the body at a different time, right? It's an asymmetrical pose. So start to shift your weight over your right foot and without dumping the weight into the hip. Use that upward lift. And then with your toes, left toes on the ground, just play with this inward, outward rotation. Okay, notice if your pelvis is going, if your pelvis is doing it. Let's keep hip points forward, that little boundary on the pelvis. And it's like we're deep cleaning the hip socket. Good, and when you get as far as you can go, that's your range of motion. You can stay there in this kickstand pose, or you could challenge balance, taking sole of the foot to the calf, or maybe to your inner thigh. So that's going to be more flexion for the hip. Just see where you're at. I'm going to stay down here on my calf. And when you feel steady or somewhat steady, you want to get curious and play. You can lift your arms up and you can imagine, what kind of tree are you? You might be taking steeple with your hands, a little tall pine tree. Maybe you're a palm tree, opening the fingers up. Maybe you're a cactus. Okay, beautiful. Gather all that focus, that dedication, draw it down to your heart. Left foot to the earth, shake out that standing leg. Shake your hips, just bump them a little side to side. And then come back into Tadasana, feet pelvis width apart. Pause here, maybe close your eyes. And notice the difference between left and right. When you're ready, open your eyes. Focus on a spot in front of you to help you balance or to organize your weight over your left foot without dumping the weight into the hip. Use that upward lift. And then again, with your right toe on the earth, it's probably just your big toe or a couple of your toes. Start to play with that inward, outward rotation. Let the pelvis be still. Good. When you find your comfortable end range of motion, you stay there, and then you see if you take it deeper. And try not to be right on your knee joint. Okay, so you're below either a foot on the calf or maybe helping it to the inner thigh. Once you've got your root system in place, then you can give your tree some love and let it grow. And don't worry if your tree is not still. Okay, balance is dynamic. We're just trying to stand on one foot here. We don't have to be still when we do that. And sometimes we find the second side a little bit more challenging. Good. Nice work, everybody. Gather that beautiful energy, that dedication. Take it down to your heart. Right foot to the earth. Shake out that standing leg. Do a little hula. Shake it out. Let's prepare to come down to seated. I'm going to turn my mat this way. You have an idea, visual here, and you're going to come towards the top of your mat, okay? Because you want to have space behind you, because we will be lying down eventually in this sequence. And open your feet as wide as your mat. Take your hands behind you and make sure you're right up on your sit bones, your chest is lifted, and do your windshield wiper. And I'm okay if one sit bone's lifted up. Let your pelvis get into it too. Just loosening up. To go through one of my favorite seated hip sequences. But you know, I know some of us have knee issues going on, so just take care of your knees during this one. Anytime we're working deep in the hips, especially seated, make sure your knee doesn't feel any sort of tweaking. Okay, take breaks when you need it. Okay, so let's come into mermaid. We're gonna I'll mirror you guys. Let's let the knees tip to the right. And we're all gonna be different. So some of us might have knees closer and stacked. Some might feel comfortable opening the hips and then thus the knees a little wider. Some of us, the foot might be out here. Some of us, it might be tucked in close. And you're gonna feel the right sit bone rooting into the earth. So I'm even just kind of pulling that goodness back and away. And my left sit bone is hovering a little bit. It's barely kissing the earth. No, I could probably fit my hand right under there. So it's not really touching. And hands on the knees. So again, your knees feel comfortable, right, in the starting position. If not, make an adjustment. And then start to play with that cat-cow. So flexion, extension of the spine. And it's okay if it's a small movement. So essentially what we're doing is we're just rolling the pelvis, right? We're rocking the pelvis forward and back. And the spine's going along for the ride. But the pelvis is moving over the leg bones in this weird little shape that we have our legs in. So we're hitting areas that we probably don't get in our linear life. So if our range of motion is limited, you know, you give yourself more love, not less. Good, and tap into the breath. That will bring that sense of conscious movement, right? Good, and then let's change it. Now we're gonna take right hand out beside us, and we're gonna lift the left butt cheek, and we're gonna turn around to look over our right shoulder. And then you're gonna come back through center and lower. Try to lower your left butt cheek. It may or may not touch. And just go through that. So on the inhale, we're lifting, we're twisting, we're rotating. And on the exhale, we come back through center and maybe we find a little bit of flexion in the spine. And you'll probably also feel like we're getting a massage for this right glute, right? As we're moving, you might feel that bone kind of under the fleshy bits, massaging our bum. Good, and then come through center where you're facing forward again. And you can lean over on this right hand. So you're just kind of tilting your body over to the side. And we're going to play with a little clamshell. So we're going to lift this left knee up and then down. Okay, so for this one, notice if your pelvis is doing the work and your body is, really moving. I want us to isolate. So here we're going to add that boundary, right, where we're just going to imagine that we're moving our leg bone. So the movement's going to be much smaller, and you're going to feel all those little muscles around your hips and your glute. It becomes way harder, doesn't it? We just kind of localize it. Whew. All of a sudden that leg feels so heavy. Good, let that go. Lean onto your right hand even more so you can imagine this leg light. Get a hold of your shin, your ankle, maybe the top of your foot, and close into a little ball. So let your spine round, take your nose towards your knee. Tell yourself something nice. And then open it up. So you're going to take your knee away from you now. And you're finding counterbalance here, right? Your spine leaning over to one side, your leg over to the other. Opening up your hip crease, finding a stretch for the top of your thigh. Good, and then you're going to let that knee rest down on the earth. Good, hello thigh. And then take both hands behind you. Okay, so we're leaning back, and we should feel a stretch on the top of the thigh, an opening for the hip flexor, the front of your hip. And we can do little micro adjustments to feel deeper sensation if necessary. Like I'm really just feeling great right here. But you could imagine tacking a little bit of weight down through your knee, right? Knee down and away from you. Does that feel like more space for the hip flexor? You could play with the butt cheek, right? Maybe sinking down through the butt cheek, or some people it's lifting up. You just play. You could also lean back further. Some people are going to be so open in this pose that they would lean back onto their forearms, right? So maybe after a breath or two, you start to come down onto your forearms. I like to keep my head up. I don't let it hang back. Some people might be lying right down onto their backs. If you get into a deeper variety and you notice that something just starts to clench, right? Your jaw, your eyebrows start to furrow, you start to hold your breath. Those are warning little whispers from your body that you've gone too deep. So I felt that. I'm going to come up. Oh, that's better. And then it's like an organic sigh happens. Oh. Good, let's prepare. Okay, you're gonna keep your legs where they are. I know it's been intense, we're there for a while. You're gonna start to roll, so especially if you're on your forearms, start to look to the right, roll to the right. Left hand comes forward so you can help yourself up. And you're gonna straddle this front knee, your right knee, both hands on either side. And it's like a soft pigeon. We're starting to lean forward, feeling now the stretch on the outer right hip or across your bum. Make any adjustment. If you want to pull that knee in or you want to extend it back a little bit more, we're not going right into pigeon. Right? We're just doing it softer variety, a little, call it pigeon's little cousin. And the further forward you fold and the more weight you put over this leg, the more intense you're going to feel that stretch for the outer right hip or across your bum. Good. Start to connect with an in-breath. Use that buoyancy to lift up. And take your back leg, your left leg, and float it forward. And it's going to extend in front of you. Just find your sits bones. And we're going to cross the right foot over top. You guys all still with me? Good job. All right, so this is the pose of nobility. You can stay here, and we're all different. So knee might be really high. Maybe you're playing with stacking the knees, right? That's probably very intense for a lot of us. And wherever you are, you might be up here, you could play with a little bit of a forward fold, leaning forward a little bit. And we're getting that action from our pelvis. And you'll notice that my left foot is bright. I'm not letting it just roll to the side. And breathe into wherever you feel this. And then we're gonna play, we're gonna have a little bit of fun here. We're gonna roll down onto our back. So lift up with your spine if you fold it forward, and just watch me demo this next one. And I might come kind of sideways actually, so you can see that's a nice angle. So we often roll down with abdominal control, but both legs in front of us. We're gonna try it with the legs crossed over. What? And so it's a similar idea. We're gonna find that flexion, that rounding, permission to let your shoulders kind of scoop forward. And then you start to counterbalance with this leg, and you can assist with your hands, right? You could use that, or you could just use abdominal control. And then you come down and you're in shoelace pose. All right, so see if you can do it. Your right leg's on top. You're rolling down. And when you get down there, right knee on top of left. And you hug your knees towards your body and you just find a nice little rock. To make this more intense, you would walk your hands down your shins, right? You would play with maybe widening your feet, maybe lifting the feet or dropping the heels or taking the knees away from you. There's so many different ways we can play in this pose. You're just finding what feels good for you. Okay, so we're gonna come back up to starting. You can do that by just uncrossing your legs, rolling to the side, and that's probably gonna be the safest, easiest way. If you wanna play a little bit, we could try coming up the way we came down. So this bottom leg is gonna start to extend. You're gonna lift your head, right? We're going backwards now. We're gonna maybe reach. Maybe we're using our hands and we're extend, 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 and lift. Did you make it? It's a little harder fighting gravity on the way up. And then take your feet wide. Let's start again. Windshield wiper. Use this moment to reset. Okay, this is where a reset's where we connect the mind to the breath, to the movement, right, to the sensations in our body. And then let your knees tip to the left. So we're doing mermaid on the other side, knees going left. And you set yourself up. You take a little bit of time to move all that goodness back and away. Find your appropriate stance, right, where your body's comfortable. And then start to play with your pelvis, tucking under on the exhale. You let that flexion of the spine happen. And inhale, we rock the pelvis forward and we start to lift and open through the chest. And again, it can be small movement. Because wherever lies that point of resistance in your body, that's where you're working. Okay, let's play with that twisting one. Finish that breath. Left hand out to the side, and now we're inhale, lifting, twisting, looking over left shoulder, and then exhale, coming around and seeing if we can lower right butt cheek towards the earth, maybe flexing the spine a little bit. And you're just playing with that, moving at your own pace, connecting with your breath. And I love to imagine that I'm doing this whole sequence underwater. Okay, so I'm a mermaid in my imagination. I can breathe underwater. Just tapping into fluid movement. So let yourself have one more twist. And when you back out of it, we'll play with that little clamshell. So letting yourself support on fingertips or palm flat. And then we're lifting right knee. And again, remember that little boundary on our pelvis and our spine. So we're not wildly moving ourselves around. It looks impressive, but we really want to focus on those little muscles around the hip. Okay, so it's going to be probably a very small, limited range of motion without letting the pelvis move and the spine. Ooh, and it's harder. Good, and you can let that go. And now lean maybe even a little heavier on that left hand. Float this left leg up. Get a hold of your shin, your ankle, your foot, and curl into a little ball. Tell yourself something nice. Maybe nose and knee meet, maybe they don't. And then open it up. So take your knee away from you, open up your chest. Your heel might come towards your bum, right? Finding a quadricep stretch, top of the thigh stretch. I'm using counterbalance so I don't fall over. And then you can let it down, let it rest. Take both hands behind you. Start to find that quadricep stretch in a different way now. And this feels good for me, but remember those little ways that we can play with this, little micro movements that I might not see the movement, but you feel a difference, right? Imagining that you're tacking a little bit of weight down through that right knee, down and away from you. Maybe playing with where your butt cheek is, right? Lifting it a little bit, or maybe sinking it, what feels right for you. Maybe leaning a little bit further back into this. Remember, you could, after a few breaths, I really invite you to explore slowly. Maybe you make it down to forearms. Maybe you make it all the way down onto your back. Always making sure that you practice to where you can have a soft, happy face. And don't just override that tension in your face. We could just, get down there, have the tension in the face and be like, I'm going to relax my face. Your face is tensing for a reason. It's telling you something. So if the face tenses up, I always suggest back out a little bit. Less is more. See if that invites an organic sigh, right? A full breath, softening of the jaw. Okay, let's start to prepare to come up. So if you're down on your forearms, or even if you're just like me up on your hands, start to look to the left so that you can start to lean your weight onto your left forearm or your hand. Your right arm's going to come forward. Good, beautiful, everybody. Nice. And then straddling that left knee. And you can start to walk forward until you feel something yummy. So interesting, on this side, I'm feeling it a little bit in my inner thigh. The other side, I felt it right across my bum. Okay, so each side can be different. As long as you're not feeling it in your knees, like a tweaking in your knees, just explore and see. And it should hopefully feel like good sensation. It can be tension, it can be intense, but it's not pain, right? It's not sharp. You should still have that soft face. Now let's start to connect to an in-breath to slowly help yourself up. We're gonna bring right leg forward, extend it. Finding sits bones hopping left foot over, neutral pelvis. Knee can be up or maybe closing that little space in between your thighs, stacking your knees. You have to have a lot of outward rotation for that to happen, right? So see what works for you. And then you can also play by deepening it, right? Coming into a forward fold, right foot active. Breathe into wherever you need this. Your next in-breath is going to bring you up. And on the out-breath, start thinking about rolling down, right? Organizing yourself, where you start to really round your spine. You start to bend your knee. Maybe you assist hands down the back of the right thigh. Lowering down. Now we're in shoelace. We're going to close that little space between our legs. So you've got your left knee right on top of your right knee. Your spine is long and neutral. You might rock a little side to side, right? Feel that in your outer hip or across your bum. And then uncross your legs and take them up to the sky. Give them a little shake. And we're moving towards Shavasana, but I've given you just a little bit of extra time to do whatever it is your body's asking for. And so maybe it wants windshield wiper or happy baby, or maybe it wants to take a bridge pose, which is really great for strengthening the glutes, the inner thighs. It's also an inversion, really good for our immune system, our complexion, our memory. So you've got lots of options. Maybe you're needing a twist to each side. So you feel your freedom here. Choose your own yoga adventure. And when you're ready, without any sense of urgency, you start to make your way to Shavasana. And you see, where is your final resting pose today? Is it with legs long? Is it with a little cushion under your thighs? Is it a cushion under the back of the head? Is it adding an extra layer? Right, make yourself so cozy here. And start to close your eyes and focus on each exhale. As if you could just melt any residual tension out of your body. Right? Each exhale, you get a little heavier, you sink towards the earth. And start to slowly come back into your body just by moving your fingers and your toes. And let that start to inspire some bigger movements, maybe a full body stretch or windshield wiper, or maybe your body needs a little hug. It needs to hug the knees to the chest. If your eyes are not open, you can start to open your eyes and look around you. Just taking in the beauty of your space, wherever you are. And preparing to come back into our day. We'll roll over to one side and just pause there, support your head, massage your legs and your knees. And when you're ready, you're gonna push that top hand into the earth, extend your top leg, start to spiral up to seated. Taking Sukhasana, your easy seated pose. Feeling those sits bones rooting into the earth. You can lift tall with ease. Let's feel the energy of that playful little hip practice into our heart. Palms together, lifting the heart, bowing the head. Thank you so much for having some fun with me today. Namaste.